Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump straight in because right now we are watching a massive, rapidly unfolding geopolitical crisis in the Middle East. This is a situation that's literally developing by the hour and sending shockwaves completely around the globe. Now, while these current events are erupting at lightning speed, they are really the sudden ignition of decades of simmering regional tensions. So our goal today is simple. We're going to cut completely through the noise. We're looking strictly at the facts, breaking down the exact sequence of events, and mapping out exactly how we arrived at this highly volatile moment, using the clearest evidence available. I mean, just think about the sheer intensity of what's happening. Missiles are actively flying across the Middle East. Air raid sirens are blaring out. Warning systems are flaring. Military bases are going on extremely high alert. And global oil prices surging in real time. This isn't some hypothetical war game scenario. This is exactly what has been unfolding over the last few days. The unbelievable speed of these developments has left international observers, military analysts, and global markets scrambling just to keep up. And all of this urgency leads us to one absolutely critical question. Has the US-Iran conflict entered a dangerous new phase? In this explainer, we are going to unpack the exact sequence of events that brought us to the brink. And look, we aren't taking sides here. We are simply looking at the hard data, the official statements, and the on-the-ground realities to understand the actual architecture of this crisis. So here is our roadmap for today. First, the escalation timeline. 2. Contrasting viewpoints. 3. Regional security impacts. 4. The Strait of Hormuz crisis. 5. The risk of miscalculation. And finally, 6. The diplomatic deadlock. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the escalation timeline, where we'll trace the immediate triggers of the conflict. Building on months of simmering tensions, let's trace out this rapid chain reaction. Just a few days ago, U.S. Central Command launched strikes against multiple targets inside Iran. They specifically targeted military surveillance systems, communication networks, and air defense installations. Well, just hours later, Iran issued a really stark warning. They declared that they would absolutely not allow military action on their territory to go unanswered, calling retaliation inevitable. And by the very next day, they followed through. Iran launched retaliatory ballistic missiles and drones directly at U.S. military facilities in the region. That brings us to right now, the present day, with President Trump and the White House issuing blunt warnings that additional military action could follow if agreements aren't reached. It is just a textbook, rapid-fire example of tit-for-tat military escalation. Moving on to Section 2, contrasting viewpoints. We're looking at two starkly different narratives here. This brilliantly illustrates the diplomatic divide we're dealing with, and you really have to grasp the gravity of this. On one hand, the official U.S. perspective frames its initial strikes purely as an act of self-defense, aimed at neutralizing direct threats to American forces and to international shipping lanes. But on the flip side, the official Iranian perspective frames those exact same U.S. strikes as an unprovoked act of aggression, completely positioning their subsequent ballistic missile and drone launches as a completely inevitable and necessary retaliation. It is this intense, black-and-white contrast where both nations see themselves as responding defensively to the other's hostility. Now for Section 3, regional security impacts, focusing on the immediate fallout for neighboring nations. Let's shift our focus to the caught-in-the-middle regional allies, because the real-world security alerts here are severe. In Bahrain, active missile warning systems were triggered, meaning warning sirens literally put the local civilian population in a state of sudden terror. Over in Kuwait, the threat level got so high that commercial airspace had to be temporarily closed down to assess the danger, completely halting flights and disrupting everyday civilian life. And in Jordan, Iranian strikes directly targeted U.S. command centers located right within their borders. This really shows us that this is not just an isolated two-player game. These military operations have immediate, frightening consequences that are causing intense psychological and humanitarian stress for civilians all across the region. Section 4, the Strait of Hormuz crisis. This is where we go from military confrontation straight to an economic shock. Millions. We are talking about literally millions of barrels of oil traveling every single day through the incredibly narrow Straits of Hormuz. It is one of the world's most vulnerable shipping lanes, handling a massive share of global oil shipments heading to Asia, Europe, and everywhere in between. And following this military escalation, Iran announced new restrictions affecting maritime traffic in this exact waterway. They are effectively threatening one of the most absolutely critical arteries of the global economy. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how quickly traders react. Oil traders don't just sit around and wait to see how diplomacy plays out. The second reports of maritime disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz hit the newswires,
global energy markets completely shook. Investors instantly feared prolonged instability, and that caused a sharp, immediate climb in both Brent crude and U.S. oil prices. It vividly demonstrates how a local military action halfway across the world instantly hits the global economy and affects the price of energy everywhere.
Which brings us to Section 5, the risk of miscalculation and the huge danger of unintended escalation. If you view this through the lens of an international relations expert, the precariousness of these high-tension operations creates an absolute nightmare scenario. Think of it like a terrifying domino effect. Step 1. In the sheer chaos of an exchange, a ballistic missile simply misses its intended military target. Step 2. Maybe a military aircraft is accidentally shot down by a jittery air defense system that's on high alert. Step 3. A civilian commercial vessel navigating those vulnerable shipping lanes gets damaged in the crossfire. Any single one of these missteps dramatically increases the pressure for a stronger, much more aggressive response. And finally, Step 4. A wider regional war is unintentionally triggered. The fear among experts isn't just about planned strikes. It's the very real dread that a simple military mistake could pull a bunch of additional nations into an unstoppable conflict. Finally, Section 6, the diplomatic deadlock. Can negotiations actually resume? The crucial point you need to take away here is that trust is functionally non-existent. International mediators are desperately working to find some common ground and reduce tensions, but they are hitting a massive wall. Both sides just continue to hurl mutual accusations of aggression. President Trump has insisted that Iran must return to negotiations, but he's doing so under the explicit threat of further military strikes. So the heartbreaking reality for these mediators is that every single time a new missile flies or a new warning is issued, the diplomatic clock is completely reset. They are literally racing against the relentless speed of military escalation. So all of this leaves us with this final, incredibly massive dilemma. Can diplomacy actually move faster than escalation, or is a wider regional conflict now basically unavoidable? We've just seen how incredibly fast military strikes morph into global economic shocks, and how easily one single miscalculation could light a match in the Middle East. With world leaders, military forces, and global markets all watching with bated breath, the coming days are going to be absolutely critical. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep asking the hard questions, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to break down the most important stories shaping our world.